Good evening YouTube, it's John, the old geek, and I'm back again with a second video for this week. And this one's a review of the AD&D module I4 Oasis of the White Palm. This module was written by Philip Myers and Tracy Hickman and was published by TSR in 1983. Oasis of the White Palm was the second adventure in the popular Desert of Desolation series. It took the party from I3 Pharaoh into the finale of the trilogy, I5 The Lost Tomb of Martek. The title gives away the nature of the setting. It's a desert-based romp based around a settlement that has grown up at an oasis. As the second part of a trilogy, it occupies an awkward position, that being it exists as a means of getting the story from the opening salvo to the big finale. But can it overcome this natural hurdle? Let's get the presentation of the module out of the way first, before I dive into the nuts and bolts of the story and how it plays. Presentation is rather poor. Jim Holloway's cover piece of a huge genie is not a patch on the covers of the other two modules in the series. The scale is all wrong, and though the lightning crackling in the sky looks cool, the whole piece just doesn't inspire in the way the other two covers do. Internally, the art is barely average. Holloway's comic style is grating once again, while other pieces by Keith Parkinson are somewhat sparse and simplistic. Both artists would do much better work elsewhere. The maps of interior locations are decent. The cutaways showing side views are useful. But as with I3, the outdoor maps are poor. The text is the biggest problem though. Snippets of information are dotted all over the place. And while it follows a formula in terms of encounter layout that worked well with I3, it doesn't work in this module, as it insists on listing NPCs under the heading Monster throughout, and there are a lot of NPCs. I ran this module several years ago, and while I can normally prep an adventure with a skim read followed by a more detailed one, this one required multiple re-examinations and liberal application of a highlighter pen. No, I didn't have to butcher my precious original copy. I printed out a throwaway PDF copy for this purpose. So, it's ugly to look at and ugly to read. Is it worth ignoring those issues and persevering? In short, yes. Oasis of the White Palm takes a story from I3 where the party inadvertently release an evil Efreeti and discover the purpose of artifacts called star gems, and it wraps it all up in a layer of intrigue. Having escaped the pyramid of I3, the party seek refuge from the harsh desert at a thriving oasis settlement. There they discover the Sheikh's daughter is missing. With multiple factions at work and a plethora of NPCs, the module really now comes to life. Add in two very satisfying and entertaining dungeon crawls, and you get a rather deep and compelling adventure, filled with imagination and challenge. Some of the tricks and traps in this adventure are wonderfully sadistic. It is now going to feel a little as though I'm picking holes for the sake of it, because there are a lot of minor irritations with Oasis of the White Palm, and many of them feel lazy or unnecessary. I've mentioned in other videos that Tracy Hickman has a very heavy-handed style and doesn't seem to care much about established game mechanics. This series of modules is I3 for levels 5 to 7, I4 for levels 6 to 8, and finally I5 for levels 7 to 9. Increasing levels of difficulty, therefore expected character progression. Doing experience points by the book, they are all woefully light on rewards for the characters, and they have nowhere for the characters to train to gain their levels. Now I know a lot of groups ignored the training rules, but a module should not be written with the assumption of that being the case. When I ran it, I had to boost the treasure rewards, add some additional encounters, and some extra allies capable of training my party at the Oasis, and this interrupted the flow of the story somewhat. For my second criticism, listen to this introductory blurb. It is fairly long. The shrieking wind whips over you, driving sand into your eyes and mouth, even under your clothing. For 5 days the sandstorm has pummeled your nerves and will. Your water is rapidly disappearing, and you are afraid to sleep for fear you'll be buried beneath the drifts. Then as you drive yourself forward, suddenly you stumble across a rock outcropping in which there is a deep cave. Protection at last. Your party of adventurers crawls into the calm, cool air of the cave and collapses wordlessly onto its rock floor. That's the first paragraph of 5. I'm not going to read out the rest of it, but this is why there's a problem with the introduction. As with Pharaoh, the desert is still too damn small. This introduction talks about the adventurers trudging through the desert for 5 days. All well and good if that corresponded with the map scale. The main map showing the entire desert is on the inside cover of I3, and it is smaller than Wales and a fraction of the size of the Mojave, which is not a large desert by any stretch of the imagination. If they were walking for 5 days, then to fit the map scale they'll have been covering no more than 2 or 3 miles a day. It also talks about them running out of water. I wonder if any high-level parties exist that do not have the magical capability to create water. So as with Pharaoh, Hickman is taking liberties with the introduction once again, in his usual heavy-handed manner. And then there's the rewards in the adventure. I've already mentioned that a lot of the treasure is quite meagre. One of the NPCs offers the party 3+1 maces as a reward. A party of level 6 to 8 PCs will most likely be well armed and have no use for these. Plus they are heavy, and they already have the issue of transporting treasure with nowhere in the module to sell or trade it, and there's not enough of it anyway. To make a campaign such as this work within the core game rules, the treasures needed to be largely valuable jewels and gems, items that are transportable. One minor gripe I have is the inclusion of drow at the Oasis. Yes, these are all over the place nowadays, but at the time this module was written, they were a relatively new foe, rare, found deep beneath the earth. But in this module, drow slavers at a burning hot oasis with its beating sun? No, 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 no. But the biggest issue for me in this adventure is the nature of the main enemy. In I3 they have released an Efreeti, and in this module they have to confront him, but he is far too powerful, so hopefully they have been able to use the thing that makes him flee. Yeah, there's something they find that makes him run away. At the end of the adventure they free a genie, who then flies off to fight the Efreeti on the party's behalf. How satisfying is that? It isn't. But despite all these annoyances, I4 still manages to be masses of fun. It plays so much better than you would expect from the way it reads. And what really lifts this module above I3 Pharaoh for me is the Oasis settlement itself, with the variety of NPCs and their machinations. Yes, it's raw and not as well developed as the village of Orlane in N1, for example, but the bare bones are there in a solid enough manner to allow the DM to go to town and fill in the missing details. And the DM needs to, for the reasons I've already explained. Add a suitable base of sorts, somewhere to store loot, maybe passing merchants for the party to trade with. All of these will enhance the module considerably. Now, the story behind the creation of the module talks about how Philip Myers originally wrote something, and Tracy Hickman needed material to link his campaign together, and he adapted Myers' work to fit the overall plot. I have a feeling the basic town and dungeons are Myers' original work, and the story elements are Hickman's. That would make sense. I've been critical of Hickman's writing style before, I know, but it feels very much as though the clumsy, linear, forced parts are down to him, and the fun parts are largely Myers' doing. It's not the easiest of modules to give a rating to, because it is simultaneously highly frustrating and immensely entertaining, a pain to prepare, but a joy at the gaming table, lazily written and presented, but yet still containing masses of great adventuring. Once again, I do wish they'd hired Hickman for his ideas, but never let him anywhere near a typewriter. But I have to be objective. What is a module meant to provide? Fun. And I4 does that in spades. Rather than being a mere vehicle to get the party from I3 to I5, I4 is the surprise highlight of this entire series. So I'm going to give this a quite respectable 8 out of 10. Yes, there are so many issues with the module that could so easily have been ironed out with just a little bit of thought, and it's no real effort for a DM to do this, but surely these should have been sorted before the module was published? However, all of those are outweighed by the fact that it is just so much fun to play, and that's what matters. Well, that's been another module review for tonight. This is John, the old geek, saying good night, but before you go, do click like and subscribe, make a comment, help me out in the YouTube algorithm. Good night.